if Google doesn't care to open up Google Drive as a tool for my AI, what Anthropic has done is to provide then instead a middleware that sits in between Claude and your Google Drive.
So what you're saying here is that the main thing that MCP solves for you is that most of these services maybe don't have an API perfectly suited to the needs of an LLM.
Mainly with authorization, like the LLM doesn't know what user to log in as, and there's no way to good way to configure the authorization there and so on.
So, I mean, this open source repo is going to have like tens of thousands of stars within a week, probably. And then they're going to have like, 100 connectors within 2 weeks.
Is that this is actually a new startup niche now being created. You could basically build a bunch of startups just being different kinds of middleware between AIs and other APIs. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Co-Creating with AI. This is our journey understanding and exploring the fast-moving world of AI. Today we're going to talk about connecting LLMs to your data. And with me as always is Rasmus. How are you today, Rasmus?
I'm good. It's first snow. It's outside the window, which is beautiful, and my daughter was very excited. And otherwise, I have less meetings this week than in the from what I can remember. So that's actually awesome. I'm like cleaning out my task list a little bit. So that's always like a nice feeling.
It's starting to become apparent how the pattern is that the number of meetings in your week is the thermometer of your entire energy and happiness in life.
I don't know. I wouldn't go that far. I love the meetings. There's definitely a correlation to the size of my task list. If I have a meeting week, then after the week, I'm just like, did I get anything done? And there's so much stuff I need to do. But yeah, anyhow, how are you?
I'm good. I'm also enjoying the snow since I'm inside in the warmth. Looking out the window, I think the snow is so beautiful. And I haven't been to the gym today. I'm going to go after this recording. And so that's my sort of barometer on happiness, if I've made it to the gym or not.
That's actually a very clear barometer for me as well. Literally, the quality of me as just a person is like directly like inversely, I don't know, correlated to like how much I go to the gym.
And since last episode, we saw Anthropic launch MCP, which is, let me check again just to make sure I don't misspell. It's the Model Context Protocol. And so it's a new thing again. They made sort of a splash with computer use, and now Anthropic is out again with a new way to connect LLMs out in the world, and it seems to be a recurring theme for them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, just like before diving into the details, that Anthropic is a closed model company, but they really like are betting on open source infrastructure. So they're really doing like the what feels like me like the Meta/Facebook playbook from the Web 2.0 era, which is like open sourcing the way they run their data centers, open sourcing. Now I forget the name. The React, just to like build to make the ecosystem innovate on top of the way they build things. So I think that's really interesting, both with, as we discussed with the Claude computer use, like setting the standard for having an agent control your computer or AI control your computer, but also now diving a little bit deeper into how you connect AI to your data in a like a seamless way. And you know much more about the details. I know at a bit high level, but do you want to just like explain a little bit what's new here and how it works?
Yes. So we can go from the name Model Context Protocol. You connect your model and through MCP, which is a protocol for how to fill the context of your model with data. So it's very related to tool use in LLMs, but in order to use tools, the models need to have them, and normally, like the tools that are available through custom GPTs in OpenAI's platform and in other services, they need to be hosted somewhere. If you want to connect to your own G drive, then G drive needs to open up an API suitable for that. And if Multiply want to be a tool for LLMs, then Multiply need to open up an API specially built for being a tool and being available as a tool to AIs. But so what they do with MCP is that they liberate developers from relying on the service provider to make that opening. It's sort of, they create a protocol for a middleman or like a middleware, where if Google doesn't care to open up Google Drive as a tool for my AI, what Anthropic has done is to provide then instead a middleware that sits in between Claude and your Google Drive. So with MCP now, it means that any developer can, with just access to an API specification, let's say for Google Drive, can build an implementation of a MCP middleware, and now Claude can access your Google Drive or your local file system or your Salesforce data, no matter how you want to connect things. With MCP, you're now no longer reliant on, or have to rely on, the supplier of the cloud service to build the API suitable for the AIs to consume.
So let me double click there, because you're still reliant on Google Drive having an API, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise you can't connect it to MCP or Salesforce. So, but most of those services have that in some shape or form. That was sort of a result of the previous kind of SaaS/API economy, where, I mean, tools weren't really useful in an enterprise setting, at least, or in a large business setting, without being able to connect to each other, right? Yeah. So so what you're saying here is that the main thing that MCP solves for you is that most of these services maybe don't have an API perfectly suited to the needs of an LLM to fill its context. And now you have this middleware.
And mainly with authorization, like the LLM doesn't know what user to log in as, and there's no way to good way to configure the authorization there and so on. So that's like there's a lot of things that need to change in the API for it to be suitable as a tool for LLMs.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I get that, because most of the APIs, like the SaaS APIs, are kind of done on an organizational level. So, for example, if I connect my Google Drive to my Notion, which we've done, then everyone in the organization has access to all the organization's files, which maybe is not that suitable, with salaries or highly sensitive information. Okay, so access control is one of the things that MCP does, but is it also that kind of, let's say I have 1,000 files in my Google Drive, and now I want to hook it up to Claude via the MCP protocol. Then is the data pulled in and like vectorized and indexed kind of in the MCP, or is it just like a very slim connector to kind of route data requests through between kind of Google Drive and Claude?
So in that area, there's actually a lot of flexibility. Since it's a middleware, you can implement it the way you want it to. So you could make a very, very thin wrapper to Google Drive, just exposing the necessary API functions, or you can make a very a much fatter layer, which indexes Google Drive, puts everything into a vector database, and then exposes that as an MCP endpoint to Claude or other LLMs that choose to implement MCP. It's also part of the offering that Anthropic is making it all of it open source. They built a website called Model Context Protocol.io to make this sort of a standalone thing in order to hopefully then allow other companies and open source projects to adopt MCP as a standard.
Interesting. But the main benefit of it is, of course, there will be connectors built, right? So over time there will be thousands of connectors, so I won't have to build the connectors between Google and other services, Salesforce, etc., to MCP. But I'll probably just have to put in, input, auth keys, like whatever, like API keys, and whatever authorization method is done, maybe email in Google Drive, right? And then now I have this unified point, the MCP server and client to sort of implement in my product, and then also have it ready to be routed to whatever LLM I decide. So that's kind of the main. It's not the main function. Kind of, it's like in one sense, a slim middleware for routing. Just connecting data source LLM in a simple, unified way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And there's one more element to it, which is that for Claude specifically, they built in an MCP server in the Claude Desktop software, which means that if you run Claude Desktop on your computer, then Claude can connect to your local files as well and your local apps and so on. So there's already a MCP connector for called file system, which means that then you can give Claude access to the local file system on your laptop, meaning that the Claude project function that exists on Claude.ai, which is their take on custom GPTs. So in Claude projects, you can upload some files, and then you can sort of chat with all the files, and you can also ask Claude to create new files. All of that can now happen with your local file system instead, which allows Claude to use less context and not run out of tokens, as the token window is not diminished by holding a lot of project files in the context. They can be accessed only when needed from your file system instead.
Okay, interesting. So there are two things that come up for me there, and let's take them one at a time. So the first is the connection between this and Claude computer use, and specifically with like agents, but that's limited to computer use. And then let's start there actually.
Yeah.
Let's start there. So what do you think there? Like if we, because what we saw with Claude computer use was it able to control your computer, and then it could navigate into, say, your any file, open it, and read that information from screenshots in one sense, right? Whereas now that agent, let's say, or Claude desktop app can control your computer, but also much more efficiently access and search your file system or any kind of API that you have integrated, say Google Drive or Salesforce. So it's because that seems like something that wasn't in that release, right? So that's added a much more efficient way to use data than taking a screenshot and processing that with vision analysis, which obviously has some degree of inaccuracy in the translation between screenshot and actual data, and it's probably really inefficient as well. So that seems like they map really well, right? That's like their Lego blocks are coming together.
Yeah, it's a really clear distinction. Anthropic computer use is for allowing AIs or Claude to access front ends, and MCP is to access backends directly. So it's a very clear drawn line between the two.
Amazing, but obviously that's packaged together. It probably will be packaged together.
Yeah.
And I can imagine they've built this with the specific architecture of their Claude computer use API in mind, and probably are training their own models to be like optimized for this, so that even if they open source it, right, so you can use it for other models, you'll most likely get better results with Claude until the others catch up, maybe if they double down on that standard.
Yes.
Wow.
And then we can also contrast it to OpenAI's feature in the desktop app, which also released the past 2 weeks, which is that it can connect to apps. There is a new button at the bottom of the desktop chat where instead of where the other buttons are choose your model and choose if you want to do a web search or not, there's now in the desktop app a new button which is connect to code editors. And you can envision that it will in the future you can allow then it's ChatGPT in their desktop app, that you can allow ChatGPT to connect to any kind of software on your computer. But right now it's only for code editing. So they have connectors to VS Code and JetBrain and maybe one more code editor, which is mapping 95% of the entire coding universe.
Wow, I mean, if I could do a spread trade of short OpenAI versus long Anthropic right now, I would take it. I mean, it's not possible, but
Yeah.
just like I think that they might be finding the perfect middle ground between like the advantage of closed models with the advantage of open source infrastructure. Because I mean, is OpenAI really gonna build more connectors to their desktop app than the whole open source ecosystem of developers? Not a chance, right? So wow, I mean, it's quite amazing how they're executing and like have, exited. I don't know, when did Anthropic even start? Like 3 years ago or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. They left like not that long ago. I mean, did they leave after ChatGPT? Actually, I don't even remember. But it wasn't.
Maybe.
I mean, it's not like that long ago,
No, it's not.
and
No,
they're actually sort of. I mean, in some ways, they're running circles around OpenAI
yeah.
with all their funding and valuation and everything.
And then to be fair, we also need to mention one hurdle with model context protocol, that currently the instructions for how you connect to your local file system or how you connect to your Google Drive is sort of involved and not user friendly, because the current instructions are something along the lines of you open your Claude app and you create a JSON file on your computer, and in the JSON file you uh, you put some cryptic JSON string which you find on a GitHub link. So I really don't see how consumers will go this route of in large scales of reading the instructions, going to GitHub, copying a JSON file into a file on their computer, and restarting their Claude desktop app. There are too many steps involved where you actually have to get over some hurdles, which feels very technical at the moment. But I just expect that it will not be long before Anthropic remedies this and just um, builds a button, a way to connect, to make a one-click connection into MCPs.
Right. But I mean, that seems like they'll solve it, right?
Yes, definitely.
I mean, they'll solve that. And in the meanwhile, as I think for all open source efforts, is the real innovation actually happens on the code level on GitHub or whatever. So, I mean, this open source repo is going to have like tens of thousands of stars within a week, probably. And then they're going to have like, 100 connectors within 2 weeks. And it's going to have, a bunch of extensions to like how you implement that with vector databases, etc. All of them are going to move on it, right?
Yeah.
Pinecone's going to have one in like a second. And, they probably already have one. They were probably pre-announced, right? Or pre-access. But I mean, okay, cool, interesting. And like one thing that I want to dive a bit deeper into is you said like how you fill the context earlier, like that it's a way that, okay, given that I can now in a suitable way pull data from multiple sources and feed it to my LLM, have they also like provided a predetermined, a fixed way on how you fill the context given
Yes.
the LLM?
So it's actually leveraging tool use. So the LLM will ask, it will get a new set of API endpoints to use, and the LLM will decide when do I pull in more data through this API.
Right. So it's actually sort of saying, hey, you now have the MCP protocol as a tool, and you can find out what data sources are connected to this specific MCP server, say Google Drive and Salesforce, and you can choose to query that. So
Yes.
you can choose to use those APIs.
Yeah.
So it's a packaged API use tool
Mm.
that we can provide to our agents, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And then the end user can instruct the LLM to say please don't fetch Salesforce data until I ask for it, and now it's the time to do so, or you can leave it up to the LLM to decide when to do it.
Cool. And I mean, then I can see multiple different ways of doing this, right? So let's say we decide, or a user decide, to use us to pull all their Google Drive files and index them like vectorized, as and then the AI can first search our vector database like our agents can semantically, but then before they want to do something, when they found something relevant, then they can actually do an API call for that specific file. Maybe it semantically finds that, hey, we have a file with all the sales data, for last month. But maybe I actually want to pull that whole file in order to do calculations on it. So wow, yeah, I mean that is really useful. Instead of giving the AI, like, that might be the most useful almost, and the application of this is like giving the AI just one tool for pulling data from APIs.
Yeah.
Just as there will be one tool for controlling a computer, whether that's on your computer or hosted in a Docker instance in the cloud
True.
somewhere.
True, that would be awesome to see. And what you're talking about now, and what you referred to earlier as the possibility of building a fat middle layer, like an MCP endpoint or MCP server, which not only is a thin layer on top of Google Drive, but actually indexes all the files and embeds them in a vector database and so on, is that this is actually a new startup niche now being created. You could basically build a bunch of startups just being different kinds of middleware between AIs and other APIs.
Yeah, especially on the open source level, right? I mean, or whatever way they provide it. But yeah, I mean, so you use MCP and then you can plug in different services. I mean, you could argue that what we are is like a super fat middleware
Yeah,
that
definitely.
will be where, I mean, you could argue that either we're a fat middleware to MCP, or you could say that MCP will be a part of our fat middleware. In our case, it will probably be the latter. But yeah, I mean, I definitely get, that's amazing. Actually, I'm really looking forward to try that out. I mean, sometimes I'm just amazed on like the timing of these things, because like for us, this is actually like we might prioritize this over computer use, because computer use is probably not like stable enough. Whereas if this is actually just well built, open source, and pretty thin, then this might be something we start using like ASAP. Because like one of the things that our customers like demand/want
Yeah.
is to be able to like connect all their data, right? And then we already have a system where any file we pull, we vectorize, and our agents can already search them. So I mean, we most like, but then the interesting thing is, then from a data security point of view, I'm not sure, but maybe, like, let's say I just take all a customer's, or they decide, of course, but like we take all a customer's Google Drive files, just run them through, like basically upload them once, vectorize them, and then delete them. Then the only data that's actually with us is the vector database,
Yeah.
which in itself, I would argue, is not confidential information. I
Well,
mean,
it's
it's still confidential, but it's
yeah.
like you can't just recreate all the files by having a vector database, right? Can
No.
you?
Well, so it's for example, if you would have access to embeddings of document from Apple, where a lot of semantics is suddenly about cars, then that would be a leak that Apple
Right.
is
Yeah.
concerned
Fair
about
enough.
cars. So there's it's definitely confidential, but it's less so perhaps than the actual documents. But they still need to. Well, there's a lot of things involved in the security of it, but one thing you can also think about is that Multiply can be an MCP client in terms of using MCP to connect to the customer's data sources, but Multiply can also at the same time be an MCP server, which means that Claude perhaps or other LLMs can access the user's data from within Multiply, or rather from other LLMs, other AI services, and pull it out of Multiply. So it creates this ecosystem where AI services can form a network with MCP as a protocol.
Yeah, I mean, it really, that's the interesting thing. Like when you really like design a very simple protocol, which this seems like, I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine it's not like 100,000 lines of code. I would imagine it's relatively thin.
Yeah.
Then exactly. I mean, so let's say we're an MCP server, just to double click on that. MCP client is pretty obvious. Like, hey, our agents and therefore our users can query all their data because we can pull it in an efficient way and give that tool to our agents, to query their data. And then, of course, we can also decide to, or the user can click to, hey, index all my data. So across these systems. And then hopefully they have like their access control setup is so good that we don't have to build it ourselves, which would be awesome because that's otherwise on our product roadmap. So that's pretty obvious. But like as an MCP server, then that basically means what we are talking about before. Hey, we are a fat layer around an MCP core, if we take it from that perspective. So why would then someone use a fat MCP server? Because they want not only the raw MCP functionality, but they maybe also want an easy way for it to be vectorized, or for other or for it to be linked semantically, which our product provides, or to structure it in processes, etc. Like then like it's looking from that perspective, right? So hey, you can connect to our MCP server. We expose a few other endpoints in the API, so that any MCP client could connect to us with some extra functionality available for their LLM applications. I'm not sure we're going to go that route, but I think it's still interesting. Is that how you think of it, or am
Yeah,
I like missing
so
something?
Multiply can serve as an MCP server if you want Claude or other services to be able to pull data out from Multiply, and
Yeah,
also push in. But imagine that the user is not logging into Multiply and using Multiply's interface. They are on Claude.ai, and they are asking Claude questions that are best answered by accessing Multiply data, my data from within Multiply.
yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. So let's switch around. That was me being curious from our point of view. But
Yeah.
like for you, like, so you obviously dove into this now quite quickly. I mean, I know you, so that's probably partly just curiosity. But have you started looking at any ways to apply it yourselves in Kindship?
Yeah, definitely, because what this provides is basically a protocol for agents. It becomes it enables a very agentic behavior where a lot of APIs become pre-integrated into LLMs, and especially if you use Anthropics LLMs. So now you can pretty easily interface. Like it's easier to integrate to MCP by far. Like it's just copying 10 lines of JSON into your settings for the LLM, rather than making a full API integration towards Google Drive. So it's a much easier way, and as you mentioned earlier, the possibility of in the future to have a catalog of potentially thousands and thousands of MCP connectors means that all of those become easily pluggable into any agent.
It's so interesting though. Like it's, I remember the discussion we had around LangChain, which was similar, like a couple of years back. Like, hey, we should just build around LangChain because this is where everything will happen. I'm not sure if that's how it played out, but the interesting with open source protocols, it's kind of like betting on a trend. Will this be a? I mean, it's not only that because you get value instantly, right? From whatever you're using, you should use
Mm.
something that's valuable now, right?
Mm.
But in this case, the bet is almost that there will be a vibrant open source community providing connectors
Yeah.
to this, because that will be one of the main benefits. Because if I guess it still simplifies, just connecting APIs to my LLM anyhow. but yeah, I mean, I think you expressed it as like surfing the wave instead of like swimming against it or something like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
a couple of years back. That
Mm.
that betting on like open source protocols that you believe in can really be like like not a competitive advantage, but at least a you know a productivity advantage,
Yeah.
and the competitive advantage against those who don't.
Mm. And I think that adoption should, for example, like when should Multiply adopt MCP as a protocol? I think it is perhaps not too early. When you really feel the strong need. I think is the right point. When just like you say, when should you hire a new person into the team? It's when someone's hair is on fire, like that. Not until then. And I think it's not good to spend to spend too much resources on integrations out of curiosity or out of just a decision that we need to bet on this. It looks like it's going to be the future, but when there's a really strong need from within the organization or from the customers.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so smart and obvious, of course, but smart that they provided a bunch of connectors to the MCP out of the box, so to say, Google Drive, etc., a bunch of the big ones. Which means that as long as we want to help our customers use their Google Drive data, which we do, then or OneDrive, I guess, is in there with like Microsoft, then it's an obvious choice. Just because, hey, okay, I'm going to get these 5 connectors and I get them in a good way, and I can provide it to my agents.
Yeah. And another sign of the times is that in their launch blog post, Anthropic, instead of saying, if you want to build an FCP server yourself, read up on all this documentation, they said, if you want to build it yourself for your own data, your own API, just ask Claude Sonnet to do it for you. It's really proficient in doing so. So that's sort of also a new way of introducing the need of opening up your APIs, that you don't even have to do it yourself, just ask the AI.
I mean, that's amazing. That's like also ties back to something we discussed a few years back with like, hey, the AI should be able to do these integrations for you, but this will be much simpler now because there's like a protocol for Claude to follow, and there are open API documentations for most of the services out there.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
cool. I mean, yeah. So go on.
yeah, and the biggest takeaway from me from this is that we actually haven't seen even a ChatGPT integration into Google Drive become mainstream. Um, and there might be other hurdles than just technical. Maybe there's a resistance from people to actually give access to their private files or their work files in that way. But we are moving towards that, and I think that it's a fast pace, but still really amazing to see just what solutions are built around this a really strong need of providing more data to your LLMs.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I don't know, like, and you should comment on this as a developer, but my sense is that the general developer community has more of a positive sentiment, a positive feeling for Anthropic than OpenAI.
Mm.
Maybe like because there's still this feeling of the big OpenAI becoming the big guy, becoming closed AI, having all that thing. Whereas Anthropic is kind of the underdogs, the kind of the alignment guys who are like really concerned about this being for the public good and like acting on it, and then like going all in open source, being very developer first, la da da da. I mean, there's
Yeah,
something where their strategy must be to win the hearts and minds of the developer community globally. And I think that's such a good bet.
definitely. And Anthropic has really been building a very consistent brand as opposed to OpenAI, who has a much more complicated brand presence.
Amazing. This has been fun, Martin. Thanks for teaching me more about this. I'm really excited to actually work. Look at working with MCP ourselves, like in the near future.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Rasmus, and thank you, dear listener.